Welcome back to Season 6 of the Interwoven podcast. In today's episode, I talk with Jessica Speer, an author who specializes in helping families and kids thrive. She guides kids through social-emotional learning, navigating friendships, and supports parents in keeping the lines of communication open. We talk about those tween years, differing social skills and mean behavior, helping kids stand up for themselves, and introducing the conversation about sex. Interwoven is dedicated to creating space for women to have honest conversations, along with access to information relating to their health and well-being. If you are interested in advertising with us, you can find us at interwoven.com, that's INTERWOVXN, or email us at hello@interwoven.com. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. I want to just start with asking what led you to get into this work supporting parents?
Oh, yeah, and it was a roundabout thing. It definitely was not intentional to start. I am a mom and have a long background of all sorts of type of work. I've done a lot of marketing work. I've been a professor. I have a background in social sciences. So I've done a lot of work in nonprofits. And when I became a parent, I realized there were a lot of things I wasn't fully equipped with. So that intrigued me, and I actually just kind of dove in. I'm just a curious person, so I dove in. A lot of it had to do with my kids and their social world and how to support them in the best way and help them develop their own emotional intelligence. So I started running some programs for kids with, in relation to friendship, and that actually is what grew into my first book. And then I just kept going. It just is also intriguing and interesting to me that I just kept going down that path. And yeah, so here I am now. I've got 3 books out, all for preteens, early teens, and I write articles and pieces for parents to help them navigate that, really amazing but tricky phase of life.
It's a fascinating time. As a mom of a 9.5-year-old, I have to say, she's bringing home things from school that I dreaded when she started kindergarten. I knew it was gonna come up. Things were gonna come up, and her little heart was gonna get broken, and she'd be faced with social challenges. And here we are. But she's also still so close to us and wants to hang out and communicates. And I'm looking for ways to keep that part going strong too. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that she's still wanting to connect and hang out because, that there's a time when they might not even want that. And that's really difficult too for parents to navigate that transition, to still, stay involved and be aware and be supportive, but, when they don't actually want to hang out and spend time with us.
So, in this season of the podcast, we're covering areas of intimacy. And as a parent, there are our own experiences with intimacy. And then, in addition to that, we also have our kids to consider. So, while we're navigating our lives, trying to learn or relearn what's best for us at this age, we're also learning about what our kids need from the relationship with themselves as they're developing their own friendships, they're navigating those bigger feelings. Like, it's a lot. So I just wanted to say, we're grateful to have you here to give us some guidance and take away some of that guesswork for us.
Oh, thank you. And I love that you brought up needs. I think that's a part of it, especially during the preteen, the early teen years. It's helpful to kids know it's okay for them to have needs in their relationships. I think that's a phase of life where they want to fit in so badly with their peers and connect that they let go of all the needs they might have in a relationship. So just, if they can come home and talk about things and we can validate and acknowledge what they're experiencing, we're acknowledging that it's okay for you to have needs in some of your friendships. And sometimes it doesn't, those relationships might not feel right because some of your personal needs might not be being met in those relationships. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to help kids, start to understand themselves and what they're hoping to get out of their friendships and how they can be a good friend. Because, let's face it, there's a lot of skills and awareness that goes into friendships and relationship.
It's true. So building on that, I want to start with where she's at developmentally. So just this past week, she asked me what a tween is, and
Mm.
she said, "Isn't that 12 years old? Isn't that someone who's like 12 years old?" And I said, honestly, as I realized in that moment that I wasn't sure, I said, I think it's used as a helpful developmental descriptor, but we all come with our own designs. So I think it can fall anywhere between 9 years old and 12 years old. And her eyes got really big. She's like, oh my gosh, like I'm there. That's me. Can you talk about the stage and give it a little more definition?
Yes. And how, just so I know, how old is your daughter?
He's 9.5.
9.5. Yes. So I say you're spot on. For me, tween is 9 and up. And since girls are starting to hit puberty earlier and earlier, that's when I see shifts starting to happen in their world. Now, whether they're starting that process or not, because some of their peers are, so what I find is during the preteen years, there's this really interesting dynamic going on for girls as well as boys, that they are starting this process of one putting a lot more weight in their peer relationships, and that's because they're continuing on this path of individuating from their parents. So they're starting to figure out, who am I outside of my family? What do I really like? So that puts more weight in their peers and the opinions of their peers and being accepted by their peers. So that's happening. So they're exploring their identity. They are trying to figure out where they fit, like it or not. There are groups and social hierarchies, and they're trying to figure out, well, where do I fit and where do I want to be? And their interests might be changing a lot. So what I find is somewhere between those years of like 9 and 13, things they used to love, they might not love anymore, or the same thing with their peers. So one simple example I remember from my girls is one of my daughters, she was just not that into like phones and devices. Like she loved big outdoor games, playing with friends, group games. And there was this shift where in her peer group, they all became really into their phones. And for her, that was a huge disconnect. So she was still in the phase of life where she wanted to play in person, big groups, and all of a sudden everyone else is really interested in this other thing. So that felt weird to her. She's like, wait, what is happening to my friendships? So I see those things happening a lot during that phase. And of course, it just ripples through their relationships.
So can I ask, how did you guide your daughter through that?
It happened to also be when she was starting middle school, which is another phase of life where there happens to be a lot of changes in friendships. So I just kept encouraging her to notice the friendships that she's really excited by. Notice how she feels after spending time with friends. And I shared what I have in one of my books. I have a book called BFF or NRF, Not Really Friends. It's a girl's guide to happy friendships. And one of the friendship truths is friendships have different phases and change over time. So I just try to let her know change is normal. In our friendships, we do have seasons of friendship and we never know the end of the story. So if she's in a group of friends and it's starting to feel like, this doesn't feel like the best fit anymore, it's okay to start branching out, and you never know what might happen. So it's fun now that she's in high school. It's fun to see the circle back. So the relationship with these girls is different, but there is still a relationship there. So it's okay. It's okay if things change over time. Sometimes we have this stigma in our head that that's not supposed to happen. But if we look at research, our friendships do change over the course of our lives all the time. So if our kids know that, it's good. That helps them know, hey, it's not just me. This just happens in relationships, and it doesn't mean I can't be friends with this group or this person. It just might be this friendship or this group might just be different for a while, and I might actually find a lot more connection with other friends.
So let's dig into your friendship truths, because I already share one with my daughter, and it's how people learn differently at
Hmm.
different times.
Hmm.
And that one resonates with her. And it creates that patience and compassion and understanding. And, also that the world has more perspectives than your own, has more experiences than your own, too. But I started sharing that with her because she's at that phase where she's establishing her friendships, and that's mainly happening at school. And then she'll come home when she suddenly hits some turbulence at school, and she comes home crushed or confused by someone's behavior. Someone she trusted and thought things were all fine is boxing her out of a situation or expressing anger in an unexpected outburst. And she just can't determine where it's coming from. She's confused. Yeah. So can we talk about your friendship truths?
Yes, yes. So the truth that you're mentioning is friendships, relationships require a lot of skills that everybody is learning at a different pace. And so what I find in friendships, sometimes when those distrust or conflict is happening a lot, of course, there's always conflict in relationships, but it might be a mismatch of skills, or they might, yeah, they might just be having some struggling with their own skills. For instance, what I'm just hearing briefly about that situation is maybe someone isn't if they are angry, they aren't sure how to express that anger in healthy ways or to communicate in healthy ways, and that's a skill that takes a lot of practice. When I think about a high school lunchroom, and we zoom out, and so we're looking way down on this lunchroom. What we have in that lunchroom is, we've got introverts, we've got extroverts, we've got neurotypical, we've got neurodiverse, we've got a huge range of skills in that lunchroom. Like, so it is no surprise that there is a lot of stuff going on socially, because everybody's trying to figure this out. And in these preteen years, it's often they're navigating situations they haven't navigated before. So they're brand new conflicts that are coming up because of this stage of life. So I love that you're sharing with her that, sometimes it's a skills deficit in us. Maybe, we don't know how to speak up in healthy ways, or maybe it's something that their friend is still working on. So that gives everybody a little bit of grace. But it still doesn't mean, if a friendship feels really unhealthy, we can set a boundary there. Another friendship truth is our healthiest friendships feel safe and accepting. So, and that in this phase of life is hard. So I've worked with a lot of kids through my friendship groups, and distrust is pretty high, and it comes from this lack of skills, because things come out of the blue, or people are responding in ways that are hurtful, or saying things that are hurtful. So I find that, in these preteen, early teen years, there might not be a lot of friendships that feel really, safe and accepting, but we can encourage our kids to notice the ones that do, because those are pretty special. And that brings me to another resource I have, which is the friendship pyramid. So maybe we should go into that, since we're talking about safe and accepting.
I'm so connected to that, so I'm ready. I'm excited.
Okay. Okay. So everybody, picture in your head like the shape of a pyramid, a triangle. At the very tip, a very small tip of that, I've got close friends, and we know. Now being adults, that those are pretty rare. Most of us can count on one hand, the people that we feel like, yeah, this is my go-to safe person. And some of those might be family members, some might be some friends, but we tend to have very few of those. So I describe those as our close friends, but I make sure that, preteens, early teens know these friendships are hard to find. It takes time and a lot of skills to cultivate trust in those relationships. So they're pretty rare. And what I've seen in my work is a lot of kids and teens go through a phase of life where they don't have that. And that feels weird. Like, they look around and it seems like everybody's got a BFF but them. But really, what I see happening is a lot of kids don't feel like there's times in their lives where they don't feel like they might have a close friend. Which brings us to the second layer of the pyramid. So under the tip, which is the close friends, I have a huge swath of the pyramid is just friends. And I am very loose with that term, especially since kids now have online friends, and I include neighbors and teammates and classmates. And these relationships are far from perfect. I mean, no relationship is perfect, but kids tend to have a lot. If we're pretty open with the word friends, kids have a lot of these, and that's important. It's important to just be open to that. These are imperfect relationships, but they add value to our lives. It might be the partner on our science project. It might be the goalie on our soccer team. It might be, our cousin, but they all add value to our lives and bring riches to our lives, even though they're not perfect. And there's not that level of safety and trust built in these relationships, but you never know. Some of these over time might grow into that close friendship range. And these friendships help kids from feeling lonely. And they give them a few options of places to sit over the lunch period. Base of the pyramid is acquaintances. So I like to talk to the students about, let's stay open to new friendships. One thing that I see happen in the preteen and the early teen years is they get really closed off. And a lot of that is just maybe self-protection or insecurity. But if we can encourage them to stay open to these new friendships, you never know. It just makes our world richer if we can stay open to acquaintances, the people we don't know but we see. Maybe we've never had a class with them. But then, most importantly, running up and down the sides of the pyramid is change. And so we talked about that earlier with one of the friendship truths is we can have a close friend that we might have a falling out or a change that can go back down to acquaintance, and an acquaintance that could quickly grow into a close friend. And that's, especially when we go from a close friend that we don't even acknowledge much anymore in the halls, that feels really weird. That just feels strange, but I think all of us can relate to an experience where that's happened to us. We had a really close relationship and something happened, and then it becomes really awkward and we just, barely say hello. But I wanted to throw that out there, that that happens and it's not comfortable, but it does happen. So the kids that know, that even though it's uncomfortable, that is normal. And then separate from the friendship, I have something a term that I coined as not really friends. And I wanted to stay away from terms like bullying and mean girls. And I just wanted to describe a situation where it doesn't really feel like a friendship. And some of the qualities there are, a lack of trust. Maybe this person asks you to do things you don't want to do. They are really unaccepting of who you are as a person, so they make you feel uncomfortable being yourself. Maybe some days they're really nice, some days they're really mean. Those are a few of the qualities of what I call not really friends. But there's a big caution there that even these kids will change. So they're just navigating, learning these skills. But that's a place where we might want to teach our kids to, to put some boundaries in place, and maybe not share their deepest secrets with. And for kids, and teens, it can be hard to set boundaries because they might be actually sitting next to this person every day in science class. So a boundary might be, just saying no thank you to some invitations. It might be not sharing, deep personal things about ourselves, but realizing they're probably going to be interacting and seeing this person every single day.
So then let's add the start to the whole concept of popularity that starts to come up in their social lives,
Yeah.
and what that means.
Yeah,
Uh,
and usually around like upper elementary and definitely in middle school, we as parents start to hear this word popularity, like, oh, she's really popular or she's part of the popular group. And there's a lot of research on this that is, I find so interesting. And so in middle school, there is a unique thing that happens with popularity that doesn't happen in elementary or even the end of high school. So if you asked an early elementary student, who's popular, they would immediately describe the students that are really good leaders and really cooperative and really kind. So and if we look at the research, they coin this as likability. So people with real pro-social behaviors in early elementary are the ones that are popular. Everyone likes them. A shift happens, usually about the start of middle school, where another popularity starts to become important. And this is described as status popularity. And these students, instead of being well liked, they're often more feared. So maybe they don't use the most pro social behaviors. They might be more aggressive. They might use some behind the back sort of strategies, some exclusion strategies. Power is a big thing. They have a lot of influence on the group. So in middle school, this other sort of popularity peaks. And then once you hit high school, it goes away. And we can often remember that in our own experiences that, there were some kids in middle school that we were kind of afraid of. So what I talk to kids about is just, if they're talking about the popularity thing, I'm like, well, what kind of popularity are we talking about here? Are we talking about students that kids really admire and like? Or are we talking about the students that kids are kind of afraid of? That helps them see more clearly in their mind what might be happening on the ground. But even in that situation, now that I've got kids in high school, those students that might fall into the status popularity, be a little more socially aggressive, they change too. So by the time we get to the end of high school, they tend to be different people themselves. So all of this is constantly changing.
So with that aggressive behavior and like the quote unquote bullying behaviors, it tends to happen outside of the teacher's view. So, and I know from my experience with my daughter, she'll say that stuff goes down usually at recess when they're
Hmm.
all scattered. And when something comes up out there and then they have to go back into the class, everyone's getting resettled, it's still with her, but time has passed. And so then she feels like it's tattling. And she's not
Yes.
quite sure how to bring that to her teacher or when it is an occasion that she should be talking to her teacher. So,
Yeah.
do you have any advice about what kind of language I can give her or tools to handle those types of situations, like when she
Mhm.
needs to bring something to a teacher?
Yeah, and this gets trickier as they head into middle school too. And you're absolutely right. What I hear from students is this is not happening in front of the teachers. This is kind of behind the scenes. And the tricky thing is sometimes teachers are so bombarded with so many things. And if they were not there when the incident happened, sometimes I've found the follow-up isn't great. So if there is some sort of breach or something that happens, what ideally is happening is, everybody's brought together. There's some sort, they call it restorative justice in some schools that do this well. They have a restorative justice program, and usually the school counselor is involved, and that calls up acknowledging what happened. Everybody sharing their story, and hopefully, if somebody was really out of bounds there, they get a chance to, give a sincere apology and restore that. That is hard to do well, what I found in schools. And so sometimes, and I'm hoping not to deter you or your daughter from bringing this up, but realizing that sometimes they will bring something up and it's just not handled appropriately. Maybe because there isn't training in the school team, or there's not enough time, or just we catch somebody on a bad day. So it's hard to know when to bring it up. If it's a situation where it is going on again and again, and if it's getting to where it's pretty harmful, I think it is important to bring it up and to think about what trusted adult at that school is the most likely to respond. If it might be the school counselor and not the teacher, because sometimes the teachers might not have the training, they might not have the time to really navigate this carefully. So repeated and pretty harmful. So that's a situation I feel like would bring it up. But I'll tell you, there's a shift that happens in middle school where even in that situation, kids can get labeled as tattlers. And so in middle school, they often do not bring it up. So a lot of schools have something called a safe to tell line, and it's an anonymous way to report things, but it gets more and more challenging for kids to report things as they go. So I want to put that out there, because sometimes we as parents think, well, just let the teacher know. But I know sometimes they do, and it doesn't actually help as much as we hope it would help.
So, okay, my poor heart, my daughter, and I know this is stuff that she has to go through.
Yep.
And my husband and I remind her we're here for her. We'll do our best to keep those lines of communication open. But thank you for that guidance on that.
What I see on the ground is there's often a lot of confusion between the kids and the adults as to what is conflict and meanness versus bullying. And again, the bullying it is repeated. It tends to be directed to one person by an individual group is directing it to one person. It's aggressive and very harmful. And so that absolutely needs to stop. What is more common is just mean behavior. And we're getting back to that skill. So people just saying mean and rude things. And in those situations, what we can do to help our kids is, help them learn to stand up for themselves. That's one of the most powerful lessons that we can teach our kids is learning how to speak up. Because those kids that might be more socially aggressive, they know the kids that are not going to stand up for themselves, and they tend to become the ones that they're targeting. So if we can help those kids learn to have some things in their back pocket that they say. In fact, I was just helping with the friendship group a couple weeks ago, and I find kids love to role play. And so we were actually going through the bullying chapter of my book, and we were role playing some situations, and they got to choose what is a phrase that you want to say. Here's the situation. You're in the lunch line, and this one kid who picks on kids a lot of times starts to do this to you or your friend. What are you going to say? And they got to choose. And so, one of them is, they have to be really simple. If we're talking younger kids, I want you to stop, or hey, that's not okay. So something that's super simple to the point. We were practicing our body language. We were practicing standing up tall, looking them in the eye, saying it, and then leaving. So often, it's too much to think of saying it and then staying in that conversation. So they can practice what are they going to say, and then they don't have to stay. They can say what they've practiced and then move on. So that is a great skill that we can teach our kids in those situations, and it might take them a little time to get the courage to do that, but we can encourage them at home. And what a great skill to learn, how to stand up for ourselves themselves in a way that is not adding much more meanness to the situation. So we were practicing, it was a group of girls, so we were practicing not rolling our eyes. We were practicing just very direct, neutral statements to stop and diffuse the situation right there. And with practice, they got really good at it.
That's so great. Practice in a safe place, that it also includes body language.
Yes. And you don't have to stick around. You could say what you're going to say and then you go. If you find another place in line or you go hang out with another group of friends or the teacher. So it takes practice, and we can help them with the words, and you help them find words that they feel comfortable with. Some of them might want to choose something humorous like, "Oh, sorry you're having a bad day. Out of here." Help them find the phrase that they feel like I could do this. I could do this in this situation.
That feels natural to them, that also doesn't escalate the situation.
Yes, exactly.
That's so great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I hope I didn't sound like I was like, "Don't report bullying." Absolutely, report
No.
bullying, but try to
Yeah.
determine what's happening here. Is a situation of mean behavior where we just need to teach our kid to stand up to that.
And we'll be right back. Hey, Rebecca here. We're so grateful to have you in this space and hope that you feel the same. If you find value in the work we are doing, please consider becoming a supporting member. We would love to keep this going with your help and hope in return to support your journey into and through middle life. For more information, go to interwoven.com/membership. Thank you.
What we're seeing right now as parents, the ones that I talk to in her classroom, that differing behaviors are starting to come out. And everyone's doing the dance and trying to figure out, is this escalating towards something? Is this a moment? Is
Hmm.
this skill building, developing identities? We're all sort of in a holding pattern,
Yes.
but thankfully sharing information with each other and asking questions. But it's hard when you're just caught
Yeah.
off guard. I feel like there are times where I am sitting in coach on a plane that my daughter is piloting, and sometimes she gives me a heads up that there's turbulence coming, and sometimes I am like tossed about the cabin and
Yeah.
I am completely clueless.
Yes, and it sounds like, some of those behaviors might be kids testing out a little bit of that status popularity, so a little bit of the power over the group, a little intimidation. So that is unfortunately so normal in those preteen and middle school years. So that's why I like to just make it vividly clear for kids. I'm like, okay, what sort of popularity are we talking about here? Are we talking about the kids that people actually admire and like to be like? Or are we talking about the kids that are a little bit scary? And who do you want to be? What do you value in yourself, and what do you value in your friendships? And I think it's okay to let kids know that all of this changes, that this is a phase that happens, at this time of life, and then it's totally gone and different. But what is great is if in this phase you can keep being the type of friend you want to be and look for the friendships that feel really good. And when I talk to groups of kids, there's a lot of shifting about going on, and sometimes kids will exit groups and relationships because they don't feel great. So there's a lot of change going on there. So if we can help kids understand to put the quality of the relationship over the popularity, that is the happiest kids have just a couple friends. The more kids we have in a group, the more there are as far as different skills and different personalities and conflict. What I have seen is, some of the happiest kids just have a couple of good friends. So just keep that in mind too. But for some kids, that might not be their scene. They might want this really great big group of friends, and that's where they are, and they will navigate that situation. But I tend to see, the larger the group, the more conflict and struggle. And that makes sense. The more kids you get at the party, there tends to be a little more drama going on.
Oh, it used to be when they were little. If it went from a group of 2 to 3, suddenly there was conflict.
Yes. Yes. So I think every person you add to the group, you're like, oh, here we go. A little more conflict, but, conflict is not bad. We can teach them how to navigate that, how to let them know that conflict is inevitable. But what we can do is choose to navigate that in the healthiest way possible. So I talk to students a lot about gossip. What is really common is, so there's a conflict between two people, and, let's face it, it's hard to have face to face conversations to resolve things. So what I see kids doing sometimes is instead of talking to the person they're struggling with, they talk to their friend, and then their friend talk to their friend. And, the next thing you know, there's just this vicious cycle of gossip and people are taking sides. So I encourage kids, it takes so much courage, because truly they are very concerned about losing this friendship. We started this conversation with peer support is so important at this stage of life. It's so important. So they're afraid to speak up to their friend because they're afraid they might lose that friendship, but they want to talk about this. So they talk to somebody else, and this adds more churn to the conflict. So encourage them to A, see if they can talk to their friend about it, or B, home is a safe space. Sometimes they just need to come home and vent to us. We're not going to solve the situation. We're just there to hear what's going on. They can vent, they can talk about their emotions. And sometimes that's all they need, is just to get this off their chest, and they can decide if it's something they feel like they want to address, or they're just going to let this go. They're just going to let this go and see if it's a repeated pattern in this relationship. But kids do, especially girls, like to get this off their chest, so they are looking for a place to share. So we can remind them it's a better idea to come, talk to a safe, trusting adult rather than other people in the friendship group, because that's just going to escalate the situation.
Yeah, that's another thing that comes up with our parent discussions is really working that listening muscle instead
Hmm.
of the fixing everything in that moment, and not bringing our histories into their stories. So
Yes.
whatever our experiences were in elementary and middle school with these things, to try to leave that aside and work on listening to what their experience is.
Yeah, because there's something healing about just being heard. And so, just the fact that someone is really listening and trying to understand and not trying to fix, that is so validating and healing. And by putting all this into words and speaking, they're starting to figure it out themselves. Sometimes when it's just churning inside our bodies and our heads, we're not making sense of this. But once we start to try to explain it, they're going to start to get some more clarity on their own just by putting words to these emotions, these experiences with you. And yeah, I have found, and I'm the same way. I just want to jump in and give some wise advice in these situations. But the older my girls get, I find it just shuts them down. Like as soon as I start to share my nuggets of wisdom, they just go silent. And so it's truly a practice. It's like a Zen practice of parenting, is just to listen. And maybe at the end you could be like, hey, is there anything you want me to do, or would you like to just share? And in case there is something, usually not, but in case there is something they want you to do, we can throw that out the end. Is there anything I can do to help? Probably no, but you already did something major and just validated their experience.
Okay, speaking of putting words to emotions, can we touch on crushes?
Ah, yes. Yes. Oh, this was so fun. When I was researching my second book, which was all about middle school, the students loved actually to talk about this because it was so funny and awkward, and the cause of so much social drama, especially leading up to a dance. Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's important to remember that I call it the crush scale. There are some kids are way into crushes and some just aren't at all. And so that right there is enough to cause a friendship change. Like if somebody is way into crushes and somebody is not, that might be enough of a disconnect where they might start looking for some other connections until that changes in the future. But crushes are super common and a source of a lot of gossip and also fun in middle school, but pressure too. So what I've found is certain groups, and it tends to be isolated to groups. Certain groups, this is really important, and there's a little bit of pressure, and it kind of becomes a fun social dynamic as see if you could see who likes who and if you can make some connections. So there's a lot of that matchmaking going on. But what I've seen in the schools I've worked with is it tends to be fairly innocent, almost all the way through the end of middle school. So if there's a crush, they might be in quotes dating, but it's really, they're not going out on dates. They might be texting if they have a phone, but there's usually not much going on there until we get to the upper end of middle school. But it tends to be very innocent, but there is pressure there. There's pressure in some groups to share your crush. A lot of secrets are shared that the person wished wasn't shared, so it can be fodder for a lot of social drama. So it's a mix of fun but also pressure and drama.
So my daughter on your scale is more the not sure to not interested at
Yeah.
this point. She's interested in friends and just hanging out. But I know girls around her are, and there are already these little flares of drama around it. But she keeps separate, disinterested from all of that. How do I keep on standby
Hmm.
and keep that communication line open for when she is ready instead of being like, "Do you have a crush on that person?"
I know kids get so embarrassed and sometimes angry when their parents like, do you have a crush on them? They just, if they're not there yet, that can feel really embarrassing. So I tend not even to go there and wait for them to share with me or something that I'm very much noticing. I just encourage kids to just do them, to know that there is this crush scale, that everybody is in a different place. And even some kids that might have a crush might choose to do nothing about it because they see what's happening around them. If they decide to share that they like that person likes them too. And then it's this other whole new awkward situation. So some kids might have crushes and choose just to keep that to themselves until high school. So there's no one path. So we can tell our kids, just do you. Whatever you are experiencing is absolutely normal, but know that there's lots of different normals here. Some people have crushes, some people don't. Some people are attracted to people of the same sex, some people are attracted to people of different. It's all okay. Just do you, and be careful of peer pressure, because sometimes students can pressure you into doing things you don't want to do just because that's happening within the group. Yeah, so just do you is a great way to go there. And I wouldn't pry too much here, because I do think kids get a little embarrassed at the beginning of this stage sometimes. So I wouldn't want them to shut off because we're triggering a little bit of embarrassment in them. But just stay curious and open. Notice what you're seeing. But I would probably wait for them to come to you. And if you're really open and receptive to all those other conversations, they're gonna come to you when they have questions or concerns. Or you can just say, hey, if you ever get a situation where you'd like information on this, let me know. I'm always here to chat about that.
Okay, which leads to, this is a big topic for parents. This is a big one. How to talk
Yes.
to your child about sex.
Mm.
Recently, Rebecca brought it to my attention. She saw somewhere that 8 is great, 9 is fine, and then something about 10. I think I stopped listening, so I was like, oh my God, my daughter is 9. Where are we at? I really need to be thinking about this. And also take a deep breath
Yes.
and not bring those feelings into it, that I can create a calm situation, conversation that isn't even just like a one-off, that it's something that I can present to her that is a building thing, that she can keep coming back to me to have that conversation. But
Yeah.
wanting to ask you, you have 6 tips for creating a home or an environment where it's not an awkward moment in time and then
Yes.
done. Do you want to walk through a couple of those?
What I found for me is starting as young as you feel comfortable. And again, you don't have to even say the word sex really young. You can start to introduce things really slowly. And for me and my family, books were a great place to go. One book that I shared with my girls in elementary school is a book called "It's Not About the Stork." It's been around for decades. It's was developed by child psychologists and developmental specialists, so it's age appropriate. And I think the most important thing is just to know that, and this is where we have to try to make sure we're grounding ourselves. It's not embarrassing. We can talk about this. And if they ever ask you, they throw you off by a question. Like you get something out of the blue and like, oh my gosh, we have to try to remember in that moment, be like, don't look embarrassed. Be like, that is a great question. I just need to think about that. So I want to make sure I explain this well. I'll get back to you tonight, or I'll get back to you tomorrow. So keep that one in your backpack. That is a great question. And watching our body language there, but being really open to all that. So I'm not going to say a certain age. It's going to depend on the family and their values and interest in talking about this. But for me, the earlier the better. And books are a great way to go, because they can read them privately in their room, and you could go check in and see if they have any questions. So I do talk about this a lot, and I use what I see online as a great way to open conversations too. One thing we have to remember is if our kids have a connected digital device, they're probably seeing some really inappropriate stuff, that we don't realize that they're seeing. Even sidebar ads can be real inappropriate, or accidentally stumbling upon a YouTube video can be really inappropriate. So I think before our kids have a connected device, with access to the internet, we need to be sure we're talking about all of this and helping them understand even the term sexy. I think for girls, there's a lot of pressure around that. They'll see a lot of images online of sexy. And so we need to help describe what that is. And, how do they want to be? And what are the values of your family as to, what they're sharing about themselves online, and how they're dressing. And again, trying to do this, without without judgment. So if women and girls are posting certain things, that is them. But how do you want to present yourself? How do you want to dress, and what does our family believe is important in this area? So this is a complicated one that talks about digging into what does our family really value here, and sharing that in the most non-judgmental way possible.
And like you said, leaving room for the conversation to continue, that we don't have to have all of the answers right away in that moment. It's like, that's a great question. Let me think about that. Let's explore that further. Let me come back to that.
Yes.
I heard a while ago that I'm a visual person, so this helped me. When you think about these big conversations with children about sex or about death, that you think about taking a bite out of an apple and then putting that apple on the counter. So you do it in these small chunks. It doesn't have to be the whole apple in one sitting and then the conversation is done. You want to give them a little bit at a time, because that big information, they get point number one and they're trying to process through that and then may not hear the rest of what's coming from you. So to take these things, to remember that you don't have to tackle it all in one moment. You can take a bite of the apple, put it on the counter, and then come back to it later.
Yeah, and if there's little opportunities to really explore something, use those opportunities. I have seen in a lot of middle schools. So let's talk about sexting for a second, because we think of sexting more as like teens, 20 somethings. Almost every middle school I visited, there's been a situation where a sixth or seventh grader has shared a private photo of her body with a, in quotes, boyfriend, and he shared it widely. I mean, that just happened. It's unfortunately happening in middle school. So I would say before middle school, we talk about that. We talk about if what to do if we're asked. If we're asked for a photo of our body, how do we deal with that? So really talking through all these as these opportunities come up. And again, books are a great way. My middle school book, there is a chapter that goes into that. There's a chapter on popularity, there's a chapter on crushes and dating. I talk about sexting. So I think we have to make them aware of these terms, because if we don't help them understand these terms, they get the definition, from their peers, which are often wrong. So I always like to be the parent that's actually the one that's talked about this before they hear about it, which can be hard sometimes. So I've always been kind of on the front end of that. But the good news about that is my daughters who are now in high school, we have really frank conversations about all of this, and they know that they can come to me. They know that I want to help them. They have what they need. It's like you said, we're slowly eating that apple over the course of years. So for me, this is not a one and done. This is a conversation that begins sometime in elementary, and I'm going to continue to have this through college, probably, with my daughters.
Oh, Jessica, thank you for your wisdom and all of the resources you've created for us. I'm super grateful as a parent.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing. It takes all of us, because these are tough questions. So the more we can talk to each other about it, we're like, okay, I think I know how I'm going to handle this. But by you offering a sounding board, it helps all of us navigate these. There's not a simple answer to any of these questions.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for being a part of the village.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, before we say goodbye, I want to ask you the thread question. That is, can you describe a time you felt totally alive?
Hmm. So what popped into my head when you said that was a couple years ago, one of my daughters was on a school trip to France, and my other daughter and I decided to go join her. And the chance to be on an amazing experience like that, my kid's first time on a big international trip, the three of us tromping around Europe, which I realize is just so amazing that we had the opportunity to do that, was incredible. So just a new adventure that I got to experience by their side was such a joy. I felt so alive, and I felt so connected with them. We were all learning and on this adventure together. It was truly just a memory we will never ever forget, and I'm so grateful we had the opportunity to do that.
That's beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate your time, and hope we'll be in touch again soon.
Oh, thank you for your work and for all you do. And you got this. It sounds like your daughter is amazing, because she's got an amazing mom. So,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today in the Interwoven space. We invite you to give us a star review and to hit subscribe for a new empowering conversation each week. Visit our website for more of our resources, health guides, podcast episodes, and more at www.interwoven.com. That's interwovxn.com. With this project, we are creating space for women to share their stories. It is not meant to diagnose or treat a medical condition. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding your health and well-being. Special thanks to Gina Barrington for providing the interwoven music. Until next time.